My mother said, "You're a disappointment," until the millionaire at the table said, "She's my heir." Chapter 1. The Family Dinner. I should have known something was wrong when my mother invited me to dinner at Rothschild's. Margaret Chin didn't do family dinners at Manhattan's most expensive steakhouse unless she had an agenda, and that agenda usually involved reminding me of all the ways I'd failed to live up to the Chin family standards. But when she called and said, "Claire, I need you at Rothschild's this Saturday at 7. It's important. Don't be late." Some foolish part of me hoped maybe, just maybe, this would be different. Maybe she wanted to celebrate something. Maybe she'd finally accepted that her daughter was a social worker making $52,000 a year instead of a corporate lawyer making 10 times that. Maybe at 28, I'd finally earned some basic respect. I was wrong. The moment I walked into the private dining room and saw the assembled guests, I knew this wasn't a celebration. This was a performance, and I was the cautionary tale. My mother sat at the head of the table in head-to-toe Chanel, her signature pearl necklace catching the light from the crystal chandelier overhead. To her right sat my stepfather, James Chin, a corporate attorney who'd married my mother when I was 6 and spent the next 22 years making it clear I was a disappointing addition to his otherwise perfect life. My half-sister, Victoria, sat beside him, 25 years old, Harvard law graduate, already making partner track at James's firm. She wore her success like armor, all sharp edges and superiority. Across from them sat people I didn't recognize immediately, an older couple, well-dressed and clearly wealthy, and a distinguished-looking man in his 70s who watched me with intense, unreadable eyes as I entered. "Claire, you're late," my mother said, though I was actually 5 minutes early. "We've been waiting." "Sorry," I said automatically, a reflex trained into me over decades. I slid into the only empty chair, of course positioned at the far end of the table, as far from my mother as possible, and tried to make myself invisible. "Everyone, this is my daughter, Claire," my mother said with the exact tone you'd use to introduce a minor annoyance. "Claire, these are the Hastings, Roger and Beverly. Their daughter Amanda just made junior partner at Sullivan and Cromwell. And this is," she paused, her smile tight, "this is Richard Montgomery, a very successful real estate developer. He's been a friend of the family for years." Richard Montgomery. The name meant nothing to me, but the way he was looking at me, with that strange intensity, made me uncomfortable. I nodded politely. "Nice to meet you all." "Claire works in social services," my mother continued, and the way she said it made it sound like I cleaned sewers for a living. "She's very dedicated to helping the less fortunate." Translation: "You're wasting your expensive education and embarrassing me in front of important people." "That's admirable," Beverly Hastings said with the kind of smile that made it clear she thought it was anything but. "So selfless, though I imagine it doesn't pay very well." "It pays enough," I said quietly. "Barely," Victoria interjected with a laugh. "Claire lives in a studio apartment in Washington Heights. Can you imagine? At 28, some of us care about making a difference instead of making money," I said before I could stop myself. My mother's eyes flashed warning. "Claire has always been idealistic. We try to guide her toward law school, but she insisted on her MSW. Social work. She said it like it was a disease." "How noble," Roger Hastings said in a tone that suggested it was anything but. The waiter appeared and began taking orders. My mother ordered for the table without asking anyone's preference, the most expensive items. Naturally, because this dinner was about demonstrating wealth and taste, not about what anyone actually wanted to eat. Throughout the appetizer course, the conversation flowed around me. Victoria's recent courtroom victory, James's latest corporate merger, the Hastings' new summer home in the Hamptons, my mother's upcoming charity gala, which was less about charity and more about social positioning. I sat silently, pushing foie gras around my plate, wondering why I'd been summoned to this particular torture session. Then my mother cleared her throat. The table fell silent. "I'm glad we could all gather tonight," she said, her voice taking on that formal quality she used for important announcements. "As some of you know, I've been reflecting lately on family, on legacy, on what we leave behind." Oh no, I knew that tone. Nothing good ever followed that tone. "Claire, I specifically wanted you here tonight because I think it's time we had an honest conversation. About your choices, about your future, About the disappointment you've become. The words hit like a slap. I'd expected judgment. I always expected judgment from Margaret, but she'd never been quite this direct, especially not in front of strangers. Mom, let me finish. Her voice was steel-wrapped in silk. You're 28 years old. You have a master's degree from Columbia, which James and I paid for, expecting you'd use it to build a real career. Instead, you work at a community center in the Bronx making poverty wages. You live in a neighborhood where James won't even send his driver. You're unmarried, with no prospects, no ambition, no desire to better yourself. I help people, I said, my voice shaking. I help families in crisis, kids in foster care, people who have nothing. Yes, very noble, very selfless, and very disappointing. My mother took a sip of her wine. Do you know what people say when they ask about my daughters? They talk about Victoria's accomplishments, her future at the firm, her engagement to the Morrison boy. Excellent family, by the way. And then they ask about you, and what am I supposed to say? That my other daughter threw away every advantage to work with criminals and drug addicts. They're not criminals, they're people who need help. They're beneath you, my mother said flatly. And you've made yourself beneath us by association. The Hastings looked uncomfortable. Victoria looked smug. James looked indifferent. This was just another Tuesday for him. And Richard Montgomery, he was still watching me with that intense, unreadable expression. I didn't come here to be insulted, I said, standing up. My legs were shaking, but I forced them steady. I came because you said it was important. Sit down, Claire. No, I'm leaving. Thank you for dinner, but I don't need to sit here and listen to. Your grandfather would be ashamed of you. I froze. My grandfather, my father's father, had died before I was born. At least, that's what my mother had always told me. My father had died in a car accident when I was 2, and his family had apparently wanted nothing to do with us afterward. My grandfather is dead, I said slowly. I'm speaking metaphorically, my mother said, but something flickered in her eyes. If he could see what you've become, he'd be ashamed. You come from a good family, Claire. Your father came from wealth, from status, from a legacy of success. And you've squandered every bit of that heritage. I never knew my father's family, I said. You told me they cut us off after he died. They did, because they were ashamed of me for marrying your father in the first place. They thought I was beneath them, that I'd trapped their son. And when he died, they blamed me. My mother's voice had taken on a bitter edge I'd never heard before. But they were wrong to look down on me. I rebuilt my life. I married James, established myself in society, raised Victoria to be everything a daughter should be. But you, she shook her head. You're just like your father, throwing away every advantage for pointless idealism. My father sounds like he was a good man, I said quietly. Your father was a fool, my mother snapped. And you're following right in his footsteps. That's enough, Margaret. The voice came from Richard Montgomery. He'd been silent throughout the entire exchange, but now he stood, and suddenly the energy in the room shifted. Everyone turned to look at him. Richard, please, my mother said, and was that nervousness in her voice? This is a family matter. It is indeed a family matter, Richard said, and he was looking directly at me. Which is why I can no longer sit here in silence while you eviscerate this young woman. Mr. Montgomery, I don't think you understand, James began. I understand perfectly. Richard walked around the table toward me. I understand that you've spent 28 years lying to Claire about her family, about her heritage, about me. My heart started pounding. What are you talking about? Claire, Richard said gently, I'm your grandfather, your father's father, and I'm not dead, as your mother has apparently been telling you your entire life. The room went absolutely silent. I stared at the stranger, this distinguished elderly man who'd been watching me so intently all night, and tried to process his words. That's impossible, I whispered. My mother said. Your mother has said many things over the years, Richard interrupted. Very few of them true. The truth is, I've been watching you your entire life, following your education, your career choices, your life. And I've been waiting for the right moment to reveal myself. This is inappropriate, my mother said, her voice sharp. Richard, we had an agreement you violated repeatedly, Richard said coldly. You promised to let Claire know about me when she turned 18. Then 21. Then 25. Each time, You made excuses, demanded more money, threatened to disappear with her if I tried to make contact. Well, I'm done with agreements, Margaret. I'm done with your manipulation. He turned back to me. Claire, I know this is overwhelming, but I want you to know something. Your father, my son Thomas, was the best man I've ever known. He was kind, principled, dedicated to helping others. Just like you. Your mother is right about one thing. You are just like him. And that's not a disappointment. That's a legacy to be proud of. Tears were streaming down my face. 28 years. 28 years of believing I had no family except the people at this table who treated me like a burden. And now this stranger, this grandfather, was telling me it was all a lie. You're lying, I said, but even as I said it, I wasn't sure. He has to be lying, right, Mom? My mother's face had gone pale. Richard, this is not the time or place. Then when, Margaret? When Claire is 30, 40, when I'm dead, and she never gets to know her real family at all. Richard pulled out his phone and showed me a photograph. This was taken at your college graduation. You didn't know I was there, but I was. I've been there for every important moment of your life, watching from a distance because your mother wouldn't let me closer. The photo showed me in my Columbia graduation gown, smiling, holding my diploma. And in the background, barely visible, was Richard Montgomery, watching me with pride. Why? I asked my mother. Why would you tell me he was dead? Why would you keep him from me? Because your father's family is toxic, my mother said, but her voice lacked conviction. They looked down on me, on us. They wanted to take you away from me, raise you themselves, cut me out entirely. I was protecting you. You were protecting yourself, Richard said. You were collecting the trust fund money I sent for Claire's education and living expenses while telling her she had no family, no inheritance, nothing but what you and James chose to give her. How much did I send over the years, Margaret? 3 million? 4. The Hastings were staring openly now. Victoria had gone white. James was calculating something, probably legal ramifications. That money was for her education, my mother said. I used it for her education. Columbia costs about $80,000 a year, Richard said. That's $320,000 for her undergraduate degree. Her master's was another $100,000. So where's the other $3.5 million, Margaret? My mother said nothing. You spent it, I said slowly, the realization dawning. You spent my money. On what? This lifestyle. Victoria's education. It was family money, my mother said desperately. It went to family expenses. It went to making your life comfortable while you convinced Claire she was a burden, Richard said. While you made her feel like a disappointment for choosing service over wealth, even though her father's entire family fortune was built on the principle of giving back to the community. He turned to me. Claire, your father founded homeless shelters, addiction treatment centers, scholarship programs for at-risk youth. He believed wealth was a responsibility, not a privilege. That's why I've spent the last 40 years running the Montgomery Foundation, giving away millions to causes that matter. And that's why, when I saw you choose social work over corporate law, I knew you were truly your father's daughter. This is insane, Victoria said. Claire can't just. She doesn't deserve. Deserve what? Richard asked mildly. Claire has more integrity in her little finger than this entire table combined. She chose a life of meaning over a life of money. She helps people who need it instead of stepping on them to climb higher. She's exactly the kind of person who should inherit the Montgomery legacy. Inherit! My mother's voice was strangled. Richard, you can't be suggesting. I'm not suggesting anything. I'm stating facts. Richard pulled out a document from his jacket pocket. This is my last will and testament, updated as of last week. Claire Elizabeth Chun is named as my primary heir. Upon my death, she'll inherit the entirety of the Montgomery estate, including all property, investments, and foundation holdings, currently valued at approximately $340 million. The number didn't make sense. $340 million. That was more money than I could conceptualize. That was impossible. You're insane, my mother said. You can't give everything to her. She's not prepared. She's not educated in finance. She doesn't know how to manage. She'll learn, Richard said. And unlike some people, I trust she'll use the money the way it's intended, to help people, not to buy status. I'm contesting this, James said immediately. Margaret has a claim as the widow of your son. Margaret divorced my son's memory the day she married you, Richard said coldly. She has no claim to anything except the guilt of keeping a child from her grandfather for 28 years. He looked at me. Claire, I know this is overwhelming. I don't expect you to make any decisions tonight, but I want you to know you have family. You have a legacy. You have resources to do incredible good in this world. And you have a grandfather who's been proud of you every single day of your life, even when you didn't know he existed. I couldn't speak, couldn't process, couldn't do anything except stand there, tears streaming down my face, while my entire reality rearranged itself around this impossible revelation. This isn't over, my mother said, standing abruptly. James, we're leaving. Victoria, come. Actually, Richard said pleasantly, I've already paid for dinner, but you're welcome to leave. Claire and I have 28 years of catching up to do. My mother grabbed her purse, her face a mask of fury and fear. Victoria followed, shooting me a look of pure hatred. James paused at the door. You'll be hearing from our lawyers, he said to Richard. I look forward to it, Richard replied. The Hastings made their excuses and left quickly, clearly not wanting to be involved in whatever family drama was unfolding. And then it was just me and Richard Montgomery, my grandfather, standing in an empty private dining room, while the weight of everything I had just learned threatened to crush me. I think I need to sit down, I said faintly. Of course. He helped me to a chair. Can I get you water? Something stronger. Water. Please. He poured from the crystal pitcher on the table. I drank, trying to steady my shaking hands. Is it true? I asked finally. All of it. Every word. Why now? Why reveal yourself now after 28 years? Because I'm 76 years old, Claire. I'm in good health, but I'm not immortal. I wanted to know my granddaughter before I died. I wanted you to know where you came from, who your father was, what your real family stands for. He paused. And because I saw the way Margaret was treating you. The constant criticism, the disappointment, the way she made you feel worthless for choosing a path of service. I couldn't stand by and watch anymore. She really kept all that money? Millions of dollars meant for me. Yes, I have documentation, if you want to see it. Monthly transfers for 28 years, all deposited to accounts in her name. Legally, it was hers to do with as she wished. I set it up that way because I trusted she'd use it for your benefit. That was my mistake. I don't understand. Why didn't you just sue for custody? Why didn't you fight to be in my life? I tried, Richard said quietly. When your father died, I wanted to raise you myself. But Margaret threatened to disappear, to take you somewhere I'd never find you. She had legal custody, and in those days, family courts heavily favored mothers. My lawyer said fighting her would result in years of litigation and possibly lose me any chance of ever knowing you. So I made a deal. I'd stay away, send money for your care and education, and she'd keep me informed of your life, let me see you from a distance, agreed to introduce us when you were old enough to understand. But she never did. No. She kept pushing it back, making excuses, demanding more money. And I kept hoping, kept believing that eventually she'd honor our agreement. But when I saw you at that restaurant tonight, heard the way she spoke to you, his voice hardened. I realized she never intended to let us meet, that she was content to take my money while poisoning you against your own legacy. So I decided to end it. Tonight. I sat there, trying to absorb it all. 28 years of lies, millions of dollars stolen, a grandfather who'd loved me from afar while I believed I was alone in the world. I need time, I said finally, to process this, to figure out what it means. Of course. Take all the time you need. He pulled out a business card. This is my personal number. Call me when you're ready to talk. Or if you never want to see me again, I'll understand. But Claire, he paused, I want you to know that I'm proud of you. So proud. The work you do, the person you've become, the way you've chosen meaning over money, even when everyone around you told you that was wrong. You're your father's daughter, and that's the highest compliment I can give. I took the card with shaking hands. Can you tell me about him? About my father? I'd love nothing more. But not tonight. You've had enough shocks for one evening. He smiled gently. Go home. Rest. Process. And when you're ready, call me. I have a lifetime of stories to share. I stood on shaky legs. Thank you. For telling me. For For being here. For everything. Thank you for being exactly who you are, Richard said. Don't let anyone, especially not Margaret, make you feel like your choices are disappointing. You're magnificent, Claire, and I'm honored to be your grandfather. I left Rothschild's in a daze, barely aware of the walk to the subway, the ride home to my tiny studio apartment in Washington Heights. It was only when I collapsed onto my futon that the full weight of the evening hit me. I had a grandfather, a family legacy, an inheritance worth hundreds of millions of dollars. And my mother, the woman who'd raised me, shaped me, judged me, had been lying to me my entire life. I pulled out Richard's business card and stared at it for a long time. Then I picked up my phone and called the one person who'd always believed in me, even when I didn't believe in myself. Claire, it's late, you okay? My best friend Maya's voice was concerned. I need to tell you something insane, I said, and you're not going to believe any of it. Try me. So I told her everything. And when I finished, there was a long silence. Holy shit, Maya finally said. Your mother is going to lose her mind. She already did. You should have seen her face. What are you going to do? I have no idea. I stared at the ceiling of my studio apartment, the apartment my mother had mocked, the life she called disappointing. But Maya, for the first time in my life, I don't feel like a disappointment. I feel like maybe I've been exactly who I was supposed to be all along. Chapter 2. The truth unfolds. I didn't sleep that night. I lay on my futon, the same futon my mother had called pathetic when she'd visited once and only once 3 years ago, and tried to make sense of my new reality. At 3 a.m., I finally gave up on sleep and made coffee. My studio apartment felt different now, like I was seeing it through new eyes. The cramped kitchenette, where I could barely turn around. The bathroom where the shower leaked and the landlord refused to fix it. The single window overlooking an alley. I'd always been proud of this place. It was mine. I'd found it, rented it, furnished it with thrift store finds and IKEA basics. I'd made it home. My mother's voice echoed in my head. You live in a neighborhood where James won't even send his driver. But Richard's voice was louder. You're magnificent, Claire. 2 weeks passed before I called him. 2 weeks of processing, researching, trying to verify if anything he'd said was real. I Googled Richard Montgomery and found extensive information. Real estate developer, philanthropist, founder of the Montgomery Foundation. Articles about his son Thomas, who died tragically at 26 in a car accident, leaving behind a 2-year-old daughter. That daughter was me. I found photos of my father, a man I'd never known, whose face I'd never seen because my mother had destroyed all pictures of him. He looked kind. He had my eyes. He was standing in front of a homeless shelter with a group of people, smiling, his arm around an elderly man. The caption read, Thomas Montgomery, 24, at the opening of Montgomery House, the city's newest facility for homeless veterans. My father had built homeless shelters. I worked at a community center helping homeless families. The parallel was impossible to ignore. I found tax documents for the Montgomery Foundation, public record, easily accessible. 40 years of charitable giving. Hundreds of millions donated to causes ranging from addiction treatment to youth programs to affordable housing. Richard Montgomery wasn't just wealthy. He was using that wealth the way I'd always believed wealth should be used. Finally, on a Tuesday evening, I called the number on his card. He answered on the second ring. Claire, how did you know it was me? I've been hoping you'd call. I have this number forwarded to my personal phone. I've been researching you, I admitted. I needed to know if you were real. And you're real. The foundation is real. My father was real. My voice cracked. I found pictures of him. Would you like to see more? I have albums, videos, his personal writings. Everything I could preserve. Yes, please. When would you like to come over? Or I can come to you, whatever makes you comfortable. I thought about my studio apartment with its peeling paint and broken shower. About trying to host a millionaire, my grandfather, in 400 square feet of barely controlled chaos. I'll come to you. Perfect. Are you free this Saturday? Say 2 p.m. I'll be there. He gave me an address on the Upper East Side. When I looked it up later, I realized it was one of those buildings where apartments sold for tens of millions of dollars, where doormen wore uniforms and knew everyone by name, where I'd never have reason to enter. But I was entering it now, as Richard Montgomery's granddaughter, as his heir, The thought was still surreal. Saturday came. I dressed carefully. My best jeans, a nice sweater, the coat I bought at a consignment shop that looked expensive if you didn't look too closely. I took the subway to 77th Street and walked to the address he'd given me. The building was even more intimidating in person. Limestone facade, brass fixtures, a doorman who looked like he could work security for the president. "I'm here to see Richard Montgomery," I told him, expecting to be turned away. "You must be Claire," he said with a warm smile. "Mr. Montgomery is expecting you. Penthouse A. I'll let him know you're on your way up." The elevator required a key. The doorman inserted it, pressed the button marked PH, and the doors closed on his friendly wave. The ride up was smooth and silent. When the doors opened, they opened directly into an apartment. No hallway, no other doors. Just Richard's home. "Claire!" Richard appeared immediately, dressed casually in slacks and a sweater. He looked different than he had at the restaurant. More relaxed, more grandfatherly. "Come in, please." The apartment was stunning. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park. Art that I suspected was original, not prints. Furniture that looked antique and expensive, but it also felt lived in, comfortable. Books everywhere, photos on every surface. A throw blanket draped over a leather armchair. "It's beautiful," I said. "It's too big for one person," Richard said. "But I can't bring myself to downsize. Too many memories. Your father grew up here. That stopped me. My father had lived here, walked these floors, looked out these windows, existed in this space I'd never imagined. Can I see his room?" "Of course. I've kept it exactly as it was." He led me down a hallway lined with family photos. Photos I studied hungrily, seeing my father at various ages, seeing myself in his features. We stopped at a door. Richard opened it. The room was frozen in time. A teenager's room from the late 1980s. Posters of bands I didn't recognize. A desk with books still stacked on it. A bed made with a plaid comforter. "I couldn't change it," Richard said quietly. "After he died, I couldn't bring myself to pack up his things. Your grandmother, she died 5 years ago," she understood. "We kept this room as a memorial." I walked in slowly, touching things gently. A trophy for debate team. A photo of my father with friends, all of them laughing. A worn copy of The Catcher in the Rye, with notes in the margins. "He was 17 in that photo," Richard said, pointing to one on the desk. "Just got his driver's license. He drove me crazy that year, wanted to drive everywhere, convinced he was invincible." He paused. 9 years later, a drunk driver proved him wrong. "I'm sorry," I said. "I'm sorry you lost him. I'm sorry you never got to know him. Thomas would have been an incredible father. He was already so excited about you, planning your future, talking about the things he'd teach you. And then he was gone, and Margaret shut me out, and I lost both of you." I turned to look at him. "Why did my mother hate you so much? What happened between you?" "Sit," Richard said. "This story requires sitting." We went back to the living room. Richard poured tea. A formal service, clearly expensive, but his hands were steady and practiced. "Your mother came from nothing," he began. "Worked her way through community college, got a job as a paralegal at a law firm where James was a junior partner. That's where she met your father. He was there for a deposition related to one of the nonprofit's cases. Thomas fell hard for her. She was beautiful, ambitious, sharp. I liked her too at first. What changed? She changed when she realized how much money we had. Suddenly, every conversation was about investments, property, the foundation's assets. She started pushing Thomas to leave nonprofit work, join the family business, take his rightful place, as she put it. But Thomas wasn't interested in real estate or wealth management. He wanted to help people. So they fought about it, constantly. Your mother couldn't understand why Thomas would choose to run a homeless shelter when he could be running a real estate empire. She thought he was wasting his potential, throwing away his future. Sound familiar? It did. It sounded exactly like my mother's complaints about me. When your mother got pregnant with you, I thought maybe it would settle things. But it got worse. She started demanding Thomas quit his work, take a position at one of my companies, provide properly for his family. Thomas refused. They fought more. And then, Richard's voice dropped. Then he died, and everything fell apart. What happened? The accident. Drunk driver ran a red light. Hit Thomas's car broadside. He died instantly. Richard's eyes were wet. Your mother was devastated. We all were. But her grief turned to rage. She blamed me. Why you? Because Thomas was driving home from one of the shelters when it happened. If he'd had a normal job, with normal hours, he wouldn't have been on that road at that time. At least, that's what Margaret told me at the funeral. She screamed it, actually, in front of everyone. Said I'd raised Thomas to throw his life away on people who didn't matter, and now he was dead because of it. I felt sick, so she kept me from you as punishment, partly practicality. Margaret realized that as Thomas's father, I had rights to you. I could petition for custody, and given my resources, I might win. She couldn't have that, couldn't risk losing control. So she made me an offer. She'd keep me informed of your life, let me provide financially for you, and eventually introduce us when you were old enough. In exchange, I'd stay away and not fight for custody. But she never intended to keep that promise. No. She took the money, used it to build her new life with James, to establish herself socially, to give Victoria every advantage. And she told you I was dead, so you'd never come looking for answers. I sat there absorbing it all. My entire childhood had been built on lies. Every time my mother told me I was a disappointment, every time she compared me unfavorably to Victoria, every time she made me feel worthless for choosing service over wealth, she'd been acting out her rage at my father for making the same choice. I'm just like him, I said slowly. That's why she hates me. I remind her of everything she couldn't control about him. You're exactly like him, Richard said with a sad smile. And yes, I think that's part of why Margaret treats you the way she does. But Claire, you need to understand something. Your father's choices weren't wrong. Your choices aren't wrong. Helping people, dedicating your life to service, choosing meaning over money, that's not disappointment. That's heroism. My mother doesn't see it that way. Your mother sees the world through a very narrow lens. But you don't have to. You have choices now, Claire. Resources. Freedom to do whatever you want with your life. Including giving away $340 million? I asked. Richard laughed. Including that, yes. Though I hope you'll consider keeping some of it for yourself. Financial security isn't a sin, you know. It's just a tool. What matters is how you use it. We spent the rest of the afternoon looking through photo albums, watching old videos of my father, reading his journals. Thomas Montgomery had been thoughtful, funny, deeply committed to social justice. He'd written about wanting to build a world where everyone had basic dignity, basic rights, basic opportunities. He'd written about me. There was an entry from 2 weeks before he died. Claire smiled at me today, a real smile, not just gas like Margaret keeps saying. She looked right at me and smiled, and I felt my heart expand. I want to give her the world. Not money, not things, but a world that's fair and just and kind. I want her to grow up knowing she can make a difference, that one person's actions matter, that helping others is the highest calling. I hope someday she'll understand that wealth is responsibility, not privilege, and I hope she'll carry on the work I'm trying to do. I cried reading that. Cried for the father I'd never known, for the grandfather I'd been denied, for 28 years of believing I was alone. He'd be so proud of you, Richard said quietly. You're doing exactly what he hoped you would. You're making a difference. You're helping people who need it. You're choosing the highest calling. Even though I live in a tiny studio and make $52,000 a year? Especially because of that. You chose that life deliberately, knowing you could have asked Margaret and James for more, knowing you could have taken an easier path. You chose meaning. That takes courage. We talked until evening. Richard told me about the foundation, about the work they did, about how I'd one day be in charge of deciding where hundreds of millions of dollars went to help people. I don't know how to do that, I admitted. I don't know anything about managing that kind of money. You'll learn. And you'll have help. Lawyers, accountants, advisors. But Claire, the most important thing isn't financial expertise. It's having a heart for the work, understanding what really matters. You already have that. The rest is just logistics. As I was leaving, he handed me a folder. What's this? Information about your trust fund. The money I've been sending to Margaret for 20 years. Technically, it was supposed to be held in trust for you. It wasn't, obviously, but I've kept detailed records of every transfer, every amount, every date. If you want to pursue legal action to recover what Margaret took, these documents will help. I stared at the folder. That's millions of dollars. 3.7 million, to be exact. Plus interest. I don't know if I want to sue my mother. Then don't. But keep the records. And know that if you ever change your mind, you have options. I took the subway home in a daze, the folder burning a hole in my bag. $3.7 million. Money that should have been mine, that my mother had spent while making me feel guilty for needing anything. When I got home, my phone had 17 missed calls. All from my mother. There were texts too. We need to talk. Immediately. Claire, you're making a terrible mistake. Richard is manipulating you. He's not what he seems. Call me. Now. I deleted them all. Instead, I called Maya. How did it go? She asked. He's real. Everything he said is real. My father was exactly like me. My mother has been lying for 28 years, and I'm apparently going to inherit hundreds of millions of dollars. Holy shit. Yeah. What are you going to do? I have no idea. But Maya, I met my grandfather. I learned about my father. I saw pictures, read his journals, found out where I came from. And for the first time in my life, I don't feel like I'm broken or wrong or disappointing. I feel like I'm exactly who I was meant to be. You are, Maya said fiercely. You always have been. Your mother just couldn't see it. No, she could see it. She just hated it because it reminded her of my father. We talked for hours about the money, the foundation, what it all meant. About whether I should confront my mother or just cut her out of my life entirely. About the future that was suddenly wide open in front of me. You could quit your job, Maya pointed out. Travel the world. Do whatever you want. I don't want to quit my job. I love my job. Even making $52,000 a year when you're about to inherit a fortune. The salary was never the point. I know. But Claire, you could do so much more with resources behind you. Imagine what your community center could do with real funding. Imagine the programs you could create. The people you could help. She was right. I'd spent years scraping by with limited resources, always having to choose which programs to cut, which families to turn away, because we couldn't afford to help everyone. With money, real money, I could change that. I could help everyone. Over the next month, I met with Richard weekly. He introduced me to the foundation's board, showed me how decisions were made, explained the various programs they funded. I sat in on grant reviews, listened to pitches from nonprofits, learned how to evaluate which organizations were doing real good versus which ones were just good at asking for money. I also started researching my mother's finances. The folder Richard had given me was damning, detailed records of every transfer, every amount meant for me that had gone to her instead. I traced where the money had gone, Victoria's private school tuition, the down payment on my mother and James's Upper West Side apartment, a summer house in the Hamptons, all paid for with money that was supposed to be mine. I should have been angry. I was angry, but I was also sad. Sad that my mother had valued money over honesty, over our relationship, over giving me the one thing I'd craved my entire childhood, a connection to my father's family. One night, my mother showed up at my apartment unannounced. I opened the door to find her standing there, looking smaller than I remembered older. Claire, we need to talk. I don't think we do. Please, 5 minutes. Against my better judgment, I let her in. She looked around my studio with barely concealed disdain. The same look as always, the one that said this is beneath you. You're better than this. Why can't you just be normal? Richard has poisoned you against me, she said without preamble. No, you did that all by yourself. I was protecting you. His family is toxic, Claire. They would have taken you from me, raised you to be like them. Like what? Kind, generous, committed to helping people. Weak, my mother spat. Your father was weak. He had every advantage, every opportunity, and he threw it away to play savior to people who didn't deserve it. And you're doing the same thing. Those people are human beings, Mom. They deserve dignity and help just like anyone else. You sound just like him. Good. From what I've learned, my father was an incredible person. I'm honored to be like him. My mother's face twisted. He's dead, Claire. Dead because he was driving home from one of those godforsaken shelters at midnight instead of being home with his family where he belonged. Dead because he cared more about strangers than his own safety. Is that what you want? To end up dead in a gutter somewhere because you cared too much about the wrong people? Is that what you tell yourself? That Dad's death was his own fault for caring. It's the truth. No. The truth is a drunk driver killed him. The truth is you spent 28 years blaming him for dying instead of grieving him. The truth is you kept me from my grandfather, stole millions of dollars meant for me, and tried to make me into Victoria 2.0 because you couldn't handle having a daughter who reminded you of the man you lost. My mother slapped me. The sound echoed in my tiny apartment. We both stood there, shocked. "Get out," I said quietly. "Claire, get out of my apartment. Get out of my life. We're done." "You don't mean that. I'm your mother. You're a woman who gave birth to me and then spent the next 28 years punishing me for existing. That's not a mother. That's just biology." I opened the door. "Leave. Now. And don't come back." She left. I locked the door behind her and slid down to the floor, shaking. My phone rang. "Richard." "Claire, are you all right? The doorman in your building called me. He saw Margaret arrive and thought I should know. She's gone. I told her to leave." "Good. Do you want me to come over? Or you could come here." "I'm okay. I need some time." "Of course. But Claire, I'm proud of you. Setting boundaries with people who hurt us is one of the hardest things we ever have to do. You did it with grace." After we hung up, I sat there for a long time, thinking about mothers and fathers and legacy and choice. My mother had chosen bitterness. My father had chosen service. I knew which path I wanted to follow. Chapter 3. Building Something New. 3 months after that dinner at Rothschild's, I sat in a conference room at the Montgomery Foundation headquarters, surrounded by lawyers, accountants, and nonprofit directors, and tried not to panic. Richard had asked me to sit in on a board meeting, not as an observer, but as a full participant. "You'll be running this someday," he'd said. "Might as well start learning now." The foundation was considering a major grant proposal, $15 million to fund a comprehensive program addressing homelessness in the city, shelters, addiction treatment, job training, permanent supportive housing. It was exactly the kind of work my father had done, exactly the kind of program I believed in. But $15 million was an almost incomprehensible amount of money. "Claire, you've actually worked with this population," one of the board members said. "What's your take? Is this proposal realistic?" All eyes turned to me. I'd been quiet most of the meeting, overwhelmed by the scale of everything, the money, the responsibility. But this I knew. "It's realistic," I said, "but it's also insufficient." Surprised looks. Richard was smiling slightly. "Insufficient how?" another board member asked. "Because homelessness isn't just about shelter," I explained. "It's about trauma, addiction, mental health, lack of opportunity, systemic poverty. You can't solve it with just housing. You need wraparound services, medical care, therapy, education, job placement. This proposal has some of that, but not enough. The budget is too thin, spread across too many people. They're trying to help 500 families with $15 million. That's $30,000 per family. Sounds like a lot until you realize that's for housing, food, medical care, therapy, job training, and support services for an entire year. It's not enough. So you're recommending we reject the proposal?" "No. I'm recommending we fund it properly. Double the budget, cut the number of families in half, and do it right. 250 families, $60,000 each, comprehensive support for 2 years instead of 1. Actually give people a chance to rebuild their lives instead of just keeping them off the streets temporarily." Silence around the table. Then Richard laughed. "You sound just like your father. Thomas made the exact same argument about one of our programs in 1995. We didn't listen to him then. We should have." The board voted to approve my revised proposal. $30 million, 250 families, comprehensive 2-year program. It was the largest single grant the foundation had ever made. As we left the meeting, Richard pulled me aside. "You're a natural at this." "I'm terrified. That's $30 million. What if I'm wrong?" "Then we'll learn and do better next time." "But Claire, you're not wrong. You know this work. You've lived it. That's worth more than any financial expertise." Over the following months, I split my time between my job at the community center and working with the foundation. It was exhausting but exhilarating. For the first time, I could actually help people without constantly being limited by resources. When a family came to my community center needing emergency housing, I could get them into a shelter immediately instead of putting them on a 6-month waiting list. When a teenager needed addiction treatment, I could find them a bed in a facility that day instead of watching them spiral while waiting for a spot to open up. I also started the legal process of recovering the money my mother had taken. Catherine Sterling, the attorney Richard recommended, was fierce and thorough. "This is one of the most clear-cut cases of financial fraud I've ever seen," she told me. "Your mother has no legal defense. The money was held in trust for you. She diverted it for personal use, and we have documentation of everything. Will it go to court? Probably not. Once we file, she'll settle. Fighting this publicly would destroy her reputation in the social circles she's worked so hard to join." She was right. 2 weeks after we filed the lawsuit, my mother's attorney called with a settlement offer. $3.7 million plus interest, paid immediately in exchange for me dropping the suit and signing an NDA about the circumstances. "Don't sign the NDA," Richard advised. "The money's yours regardless. You'll win if it goes to court. Don't let her buy your silence." I turned down the NDA. My mother paid anyway. $3.7 million appeared in a bank account Catherine set up for me. I stared at the balance on my phone, trying to make it feel real. I'd never had more than $5,000 in savings at any one time. Now I had millions. "What are you going to do with it?" Maya asked. We were at our favorite cheap Thai place in Astoria, splitting pad CW like we had for years. Except now I could have bought the restaurant. The cognitive dissonance was strange. "I don't know. Keep working, I guess. Maybe move to a bigger apartment. You could buy an apartment. Multiple apartments. A building. That feels wrong. Using money my mother stole to live extravagantly. It's not wrong. It's your money. You're allowed to enjoy it. But I couldn't. Every time I thought about spending it on myself, I heard my mother's voice. You're wasting your advantages, throwing away opportunities, being deliberately difficult." Except now the voice was different. Now it said, "You're wasting this gift, this chance to do good, just to prove something about staying humble." Richard noticed my struggle. "You're allowed to have nice things, Claire. Financial security isn't a moral failing." "I know. Intellectually, I know. But it feels wrong. Then let's reframe it. You can't do this work forever if you're burned out and exhausted. Living in a studio apartment in Washington Heights with a broken shower, working 2 jobs, barely sleeping, that's not sustainable. Taking care of yourself isn't selfish. It's necessary." He had a point. I was exhausted. The split schedule was killing me, and my studio had started feeling less cozy and more claustrophobic. What if I found a nicer place? Nothing crazy, just more space. A bedroom. A working shower. That sounds eminently reasonable. I found a 1-bedroom in Brooklyn Heights. Nothing extravagant. 950 square feet. A little natural light. A bathroom where everything worked. But it felt like a palace compared to my studio. I bought it outright. No mortgage. No landlord, just mine. The day I moved in, Maya brought champagne. "To upward mobility," she toasted. "And to not letting your mother's voice live in your head rent-free anymore. I'm working on it. I know. But Claire, you deserve good things. You've spent your whole life helping other people. It's okay to help yourself, too." I was settling into my new normal, foundation work, community center, the new apartment, weekly dinners with Richard where he told me stories about my father, when Victoria showed up at my workplace. I was in my office at the community center, reviewing case files, when my colleague stuck her head in. "Claire, there's someone here to see you. Says she's your sister." I found Victoria in the waiting room, looking profoundly uncomfortable. She'd never been to the center before, never shown any interest in the work I did. Seeing her here, in her designer suit and expensive shoes, surrounded by the families we served, felt surreal. "Victoria, what are you doing here? We need to talk." Privately, I led her to my office and closed the door. "If this is about the lawsuit, it's not. Mom's angry about that, obviously, but James told her she's lucky you're only suing for what you can prove. If you pushed harder, criminal charges might be on the table." "Is that a threat?" "No." Victoria sat down, and for the first time in our lives, she looked uncertain. "I didn't know, Claire. About the trust fund, about Richard, about any of it. Mom told me your father's family was dead, same as she told you. I thought," she paused, "I thought we were both James's daughters. That you were just the difficult one who wouldn't accept his help. I'm not James's daughter. I'm Thomas Montgomery's daughter. I know that now, and I'm realizing that explains a lot about why Mom treated you the way she did. You look like him. You act like him. You even chose the same career path. You're a living reminder of the man she lost and couldn't control. I'd come to the same conclusion, but hearing Victoria say it out loud was validating. Why are you here, Victoria? Because I've been thinking about that dinner at Rothschild's. About the way Richard looked at you, like you were precious, important, someone he was proud of. And I realized no one's ever looked at me like that. James is proud of my accomplishments, but it's conditional, based on performance. If I failed the bar exam, or didn't make partner track, or disappointed him somehow, that pride would disappear. I'm sorry. Don't be. I'm not here for sympathy. Victoria straightened her shoulders. I'm here because I want to understand why you chose this. She gestured around my cramped office with its flickering fluorescent lights and donated furniture. You could have had everything. Money, status, comfort. Why choose this instead? I thought about how to answer that. How to explain to someone raised to measure success only in dollar signs that some things mattered more. Because I want to help people. Actually help them, not just write checks to feel good about myself. I want to know that the work I do matters, that I'm making someone's life genuinely better. That's worth more to me than any salary or status. But you have money now. Millions. You could help people without working here. I could, but I don't want to be the kind of person who throws money at problems from a distance. I want to be in it, with people, understanding their struggles. That's what my father did. That's what Richard does with the foundation. Money is just a tool. The real work is showing up. Victoria was quiet for a long time. I think I've wasted my life, she finally said. No, you haven't. You're 25. I've wasted it pursuing things that don't matter. Partner track, the right engagement, the right social connections. None of it means anything. Not really. But you found meaning. Purpose. You're doing something that matters. It's not too late for you to do the same. Isn't it? I'm engaged to the Morrison boy. Mom's choice, not mine. I'm on partner track at James's firm because of nepotism, not merit. My entire life has been about meeting other people's expectations. So stop meeting them. Make different choices. Easy for you to say. You were never the favorite. You didn't have everyone watching, waiting for you to be perfect. You're right. I was never the favorite. But Victoria, being the disappointment gave me freedom you never had. Freedom to fail, to disappoint people, to choose meaning over approval. Maybe it's time you gave yourself that same freedom. She left shortly after that, looking thoughtful. I didn't know if anything would change for her. People rarely made dramatic life changes just from one conversation. But maybe I'd planted a seed. Chapter 4, Legacy. 1 year after that dinner at Rothschild's, I stood in front of a crowd of 200 people at the grand opening of Montgomery House, Brooklyn, a comprehensive homeless services center that would serve as a model for similar facilities across the city. Richard stood beside me, beaming with pride. Behind us, the building gleamed, new construction, state-of-the-art facilities, everything my father had dreamed of when he'd built the original Montgomery House 40 years ago. This facility, I told the crowd, reading from notes I'd written at 2 a.m. the night before, represents what's possible when we choose to invest in human dignity instead of giving up on people society has forgotten. We have beds for 150 individuals, medical and mental health services on site, job training programs, addiction treatment, and most importantly, a pathway to permanent supportive housing. No one who comes through these doors will be turned away because we can't afford to help them. The crowd applauded. I saw Maya in the front row, crying and cheering simultaneously. I saw Catherine Sterling, who become not just my attorney but a friend. I saw the community center families I'd worked with for years, who'd supported this project from conception to completion. I didn't see my mother, or Victoria, or James. I'd sent them invitations, a last gesture of reconciliation that I knew they'd reject. I was right, but I was okay with that. I'd built a family that chose to be there, that supported me, that believed in the work I was doing. That was enough. After the ceremony, Richard pulled me aside. Your father would be so proud of you, Claire. This, all of this, is exactly what he dreamed of. I wish he could have seen it. In a way, he is. Every person you help, every life you change, that's Thomas living on through you. He paused. I have something for you. He handed me an envelope. Inside was a letter, handwritten, dated September 1998, 2 months before my father died. My dearest Claire, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone. I'm so sorry I won't be there to watch you grow up, to guide you, to be the father you deserve. But I want you to know something. You are my greatest achievement. Not the shelters I built, not the programs I created, but you. You, with your whole life ahead of you, full of possibility and potential. I don't know what you'll choose to do with your life. Maybe you'll follow in my footsteps. Maybe you'll forge your own path entirely. But whatever you choose, I hope you'll choose it for meaning, not for money. I hope you'll measure success not by your bank account, but by the lives you touch, the people you help, the difference you make. The Montgomery family has wealth. But wealth is just a tool, a resource, a means to an end. What matters is how you use it. Whether you give away every penny or build an empire, let your choices be guided by compassion, by justice, by a belief that every person deserves dignity and opportunity. I won't be there to tell you this in person, but I love you, Claire. More than words can express. You are my hope, my joy, my legacy. Be brave, be kind, be yourself, and know that wherever I am, I'm proud of you. All my love, Dad. I read it 3 times, tears streaming down my face before I could speak. He wrote this for me before he died. He wrote letters for all the important moments he thought he'd miss. Your first day of school, your graduation, your wedding. This one was for when you became an adult and started making your own choices about how to live your life. Richard smiled. He knew you'd choose well. That night, I went to my apartment, my beautiful 1-bedroom in Brooklyn Heights with its working shower and natural light and space to breathe, and I thought about the year that had passed. A year ago, I'd been the family disappointment, the poor one, the failure. Now I was the director of the Montgomery Foundation's Homeless Services Division, overseeing $50 million in annual grants. I had $3.7 million in the bank and would inherit $340 million when Richard died. A thought I tried not to dwell on, because I'd come to love my grandfather and didn't want to lose him anytime soon. But more than the money, I had purpose. I had meaning. I had a connection to a father I'd never met, but who'd shaped my life anyway. I had a legacy to uphold and the resources to actually make a difference. My phone rang. A number I didn't recognize. I answered cautiously. Hello, Claire. It's Victoria. I hadn't heard from my sister since she'd visited my office 6 months ago. Victoria. Hi. I wanted to let you know. I broke off my engagement. What? Why? Because you were right. I was living someone else's life, meeting someone else's expectations. So I'm making changes. I left James's firm. I'm applying for positions at nonprofits, looking for work that actually matters. Victoria, that's amazing. It's terrifying. I don't know what I'm doing, and Mom's furious, and James thinks I've lost my mind. But I feel lighter somehow, like I can breathe for the first time in years. I'm proud of you. Thank you. And Claire, I'm sorry for everything, for how I treated you, for going along with Mom's narrative, for making you feel less than. You were never the disappointment. You were just the brave one. After we hung up, I sat there holding the phone, marveling at how much could change in a year. How lives could be transformed, relationships rebuilt, new paths forged. I thought about my mother, Margaret Chun, who'd lied for 20 years, stolen millions, tried to make me into something I wasn't. I hadn't spoken to her since she showed up at my studio and I told her to leave. As far as I knew, she was still living her Upper West Side life, attending her charity galas, pretending her daughters didn't exist. Part of me was sad about that, but a larger part was at peace with it. Some relationships were toxic, and walking away was the only healthy choice. I'd chosen my own path, built my own family, created my own legacy, and I'd done it without her approval, without her money, without her validation. I'd done it because my father had believed I would, because Richard had faith in me, because I'd finally learned that disappointment was just a word people used when you refused to meet their expectations. I pulled out my father's letter and read it one more time. Be brave, be kind, be yourself. I was trying. Every day I was trying. And for the first time in my life, I thought I might actually be succeeding. My phone buzzed. A text from Richard. Dinner Sunday? I found more of your father's journals. Thought you might want to read them. I smiled and typed back, "I'd love that. Thank you, Grandpa." Because that's what he was now. Not Richard Montgomery, the millionaire philanthropist. Just Grandpa. Family. The family I'd been denied for 28 years, but had finally found. I looked around my apartment, my home, bought with money that should have been mine all along, in a life I built despite every obstacle my mother had put in my way. I thought about Montgomery House, Brooklyn, about the 150 people who'd have shelter tonight because of the work we'd done, about the families I'd help tomorrow at the community center, about the foundation board meeting next week where we'd approve more grants, fund more programs, change more lives. My mother had called me a disappointment, but I'd proven her wrong. Not by becoming wealthy or successful in the way she valued, but by becoming exactly who I was meant to be, my father's daughter, my grandfather's heir, a person who measured success not in dollars but in lives changed and people helped. I was 29 years old, had more money than I could spend in several lifetimes, and worked 60-hour weeks at a community center making $52,000 a year. And I'd never been happier, because I'd finally learned the truth my mother never understood. Disappointment was just another word for choosing differently. And I'd chosen well. The end.